Today I'm going to do a channel on the rise of wisdom. Things are changing in the Earth-human paradigm, and one of these is the rise of wisdom. So there's not really much more to say other than that, so let's go straight into it. The wisdom field is a fifth-dimensional quality, not in that it is inherent to the fifth dimension, but that it is more accessible in the fifth dimension. It is a quality which is more accessible as vibration increases. Wisdom is inherent to the One. And as vibration of the individual increases, it is a movement towards realization as the One. It is a closing of the gap. This being the One, this being you, as your vibration increases. It is a movement towards One. It is a return home. And as such, as vibration increases, there is greater access to the qualities of the One, which include wisdom. So, as humanity moves increasingly into the fifth dimension, there is an increase in the capacity to access the wisdom field, this extra dimensionality, which is accessible from all dimensions, but is inherent to none of them. So, humanity at this time is approaching the end of its transition through three-dimensionality, such that most humans at this time are a blending of both three-dimension and fifth-dimensional beings. There is an expansion of extra dimensionality, of appreciating that there is something more to self than the mind, the body, the personality. There appears to be something additional. There is a presence which is not defined by the apparatus, not defined by the inherent artificial intelligence, which is the mind, not defined by the personality. This is an increasing appreciation of fifth dimensionality, and that is synonymous with an increasing in vibration. And with an increasing of vibration, there is a movement towards the One, and so the qualities of the One are becoming more available. And that includes wisdom. In the Earth human experience, for a very long time, intellect has been the authority. It has been the gatekeeper of choice. And this system of intellect, which has predominated on planet Earth, relies on identity with the mind and denies the existence of wisdom. So this structure is disempowering for those that are not part of the intellectual elite, those that are the regular people, not part of the intellectual elite, those that are the decision makers, those that are the gatekeepers, those that determine the direction of society because they position themselves as having access to the most intellectual power, because they have education or they have teams that work under their direction which are highly educated, highly intellectual. And this has been used as a form of authority. So in the direction of countries, of science, of medicine, only those who have this backing as their authority, this intellectualism, have been determining the direction of society. However, intellect is a finite concept, whereas wisdom is an infinite concept. So there is no limitation to wisdom in the way that there is a limitation to intellect. Intellect is related very closely to physical attributes. If a person is born with a particular type of genetics, then they can have the capacity for a very high intellect. Whereas others who are not born with the same genetic gifts have a decreased access to intellect. And so, in a sense, intellect is used as a class system, as a way to justify the elevation of some to have control over others. This system does have merit, because there are many ways in which humanity lives its lives where intellect is important. However, this concept of intellect, not those who are only the most intelligent, also those who surround themselves with so-called experts so that they can mandate laws, mandate directions, and then justify their actions with the support of others who have a high intellect, who are steeped in education. And so this strataing, where people are anointed as decision makers because they have intellect, and also because they have access to intellect, to education. Draws a propensity for the darkness to utilize this strategy to elevate itself and control those underneath who do not have access to decision making because they are not intellectual, or because they do not have access to teams and so on who are intellectual, who are educated. However, something very fundamental is changing in the earth human experience. There is now the rise of wisdom. So, for a very long time in human history, the direction and so on of a country has been determined by the dictates of those that have elevated themselves as the intellectuals, or as those who are served by an army of intellectuals who help them to formulate and justify the decisions, which are then thrust down on those who are not part of this upper level. In a way, those who have controlled the human experience for a very long time have inoculated themselves from challenge and retribution through this concept of them being the wielders of the highest intellectual power, the most educated. And it has turned into a manipulation where they justify actions which don't make sense, but they cleverly use intellectualism to justify their decisions. And the individual who are not part of this upper layer, not part of the decision-making process, have had in the past, many had a sense, these dictates, these mandates that are being pushed down from above, they are in conflict with my sense of what is right and what is wrong, what is appropriate. However, I'm not an intellectual. I'm not highly educated, not as immersed into the information field of this particular topic, which is the central focus of these mandates. Therefore, although I feel some conflict, I acquiesce, I recede, and humbly admit I don't know, and therefore I must be wrong. My feelings of conflict are indication that I am wrong, because the intellectuals and those that wield intellectuality, they are superior and I am inferior. So I will ignore and identify myself as being wrong and less incapacity to make these decisions. This has been the direction and the presentation of the human field for a very long time. But what is occurring now, which is all part of this same thing that is happening, essentially the ascension into a fifth dimensional state, is manifesting in multiple ways. And one of the ways is that there is a rise in wisdom within self. It's an increasing in vibration, which increases the sense of something being right and wrong, having an intuitive sense. Is this right? Is this just? Should I acquiesce? This sense of knowing is on the rise as humanity increases in vibration. At the same time, intellect is stagnant. Intellect mostly is a finite capacity. There is the rising in wisdom, which is, in a sense, a relative shift in capacity for genius, in capacity to be the most aligned with what is conducive to an outcome which is beneficial for the light. Also, another aspect of the awakening which is playing a part in this is the growing distrust in those that are the decision makers, the intellectuals, those that have surrounded themselves with intellectuals to inoculate themselves from scrutiny, so they can remain as the gatekeepers and as the people who determine the direction, determine the culture, determine the way in which people live by thrusting it down from above into the human field. Top-down engineering of the human experience. This distrust of the common man, woman and child is an aspect of the awakening, and it is an aspect of the rise of wisdom. What has fundamentally changed in the experience for the regular person when they receive these top-down mandates, when they are expected to be subject to this top-down engineering, is they still have this feeling of conflict, something isn't right, but it is becoming so pronounced now, so rich and vibrant, that it is becoming increasingly difficult for the individual to push it aside and ignore it, and say to themselves, what I feel is in direct conflict with what the intellectual gatekeepers are saying is so, and saying should be the way. Therefore, I am wrong, and I will ignore my inner feeling. This inner feeling is becoming so strong, becoming so pronounced, that when there is this top-down engineering into their experience, and they are expected to now behave in a way which intellectuals say is the way, because they have proof through their intellectualism that this is what should be. But the conflict is so pronounced, and the feeling within that something is not right is so strong, that the individual now is beginning to reject the grounds on which they have been maintaining their position for so long. No longer do they acquiesce. Instead, they challenge. Why? Prove it. I don't believe you. The way that you are proving it is just a contortion of information under the guise of superior intellect, to fool me into doing something which isn't right, to fool me into accepting something which is not for the reasons you say that it is. You say that I should accept your mandates because it is what is best for me, best for my family, best for my community. But I don't believe that it is. I don't trust you anymore. The intellectualism that you use to justify, it doesn't hold up. It is faulty. And I don't believe that you don't know it's so. It is my belief that you know exactly what you are doing. You know that what you are asking and the reasons that you are giving for it have nothing to do with what you say it does, but is instead a strategic move by you to increase your power, authority and wealth at the cost of my individual power, authority and wealth, and that of the community which I am a part of. So, I reject this embracing of wisdom and rejection of the smokescreen of intellectualism is a dramatic shift in the human experience, because increasingly so, what is now occurring is the culture is beginning to become from the grassroots. No longer is culture exclusively engineered from the top down, through this guise of authority, intellectualism, gatekeepers, and so on. When you look at a society and you see ideas which are being implemented, thrust into a society, and those ideas clearly make no sense, then it can be extrapolated from this observation that those ideas are being implemented into society because they are being engineered from the top down. They are not a manifestation of the percolation of wisdom from the grassroots through all of the society until at the very top, those ideas which are most steeped in wisdom, which have been challenged in the free market ideas and resoundingly made it to the top as an extension of the wisdom of the entire human field, and then through this process implemented to become part of a society. This is the organic rise of wisdom, so that a society operates on the basis of wisdom, which is the wisdom of the entire human field. And when the entire human field is utilized in this way, the appearance will be dramatically different to what it is when it is the result of a top-down engineering, where the ideas in a society are the result of being forced into the culture through the cultural pillars, through news media, entertainment media, law, government, education, medicine, and so on. These cultural pillars are utilized by those that place themselves in this upper level, immunized from scrutiny through this facade of superior intellect, intellectualism, which is coming from not billions grassroots percolating to the surface so that most wise and evolved concepts integrate into society, become part of society, but instead a small, centralized group of people that are putting ideas into the culture, not because it is beneficial to the all, but instead because it is beneficial to them, because they self-identify as not being part of the whole, not being part of the all, not being part of the entire human field, but instead as being the masters. Forcing their ideas into the culture to ensure that they remain the masters. So the disruption you see in the human experience right now is the manifestation of the rise of wisdom, and each individual feeling such a strong sense within themselves as they increasingly access the infinite wisdom field, which is consequential to their increasing vibration as they move increasingly into fifth dimensionality, where there is greater access to this wisdom field. There is a shrugging off of the intellectuals, of the gatekeepers, of the power of intellect over shaping their lives. And now there is this unification of humanity into a group being with a unifying purpose to expand, to prosper, to become more. For all aspects, combining into a cohesive unity. And as more join this cohesive unity, which is the birthing, the awakening of the fifth dimensional humanity being, there is an amplification of wisdom. There is an increase because the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. You, the individual, have access to the infinite wisdom field. However, your access is in some way correlated to your vibration, correlated to your vibratory state, to your awakening. However, as each individual human integrates increasingly so into the humanity being, begins to realize that all other aspects of the humanity being are them, are the humanity being experiencing itself through the unique perspective which is someone else, but is also experiencing itself through you. So you and them are the same being. The love that you have for self is the same love that you have for them, because they are the same being. You are including them in your field of loving empathy, harmonizing, integrating into the single being. And as the single being becomes more and more awakened of itself, the immense potential of access to the wisdom field, which is consequential to a group being, becomes available to the individual, because you begin to access not the wisdom which is available to the individual, but the wisdom that is available to the much larger, much more awakened group being. And so, this is occurring where each human being, particularly those that are choosing to become more integrated into the humanity being, that are choosing to increase their vibration, to have love for all others, to purge their darkness, to polarize to the light, to prepare themselves for ascension, to be more aware and familiar of their extra dimensionality, to appreciate their infinity, to become more experienced in the physical paradigm as the presence rather than as the apparatus. All of these are increasing the capacity for individuals to access profound wisdom. And this is all occurring in the context of those that have used intellectualism, who have been maintaining their position through becoming masters of the 3D matrix instead of masters of their understanding of self as the light, as the individuation of the one. So they have used intellectualism and darkness to maintain their power, to maintain this upper level. And polarized to the light, they have rejected. Polarized to the darkness, they have rejected the light. They have rejected the concepts of being good and benevolent and generous and loving and caring, of essentially service to others, and instead adapted and steeped themselves in the concept of service to self through darkness, through manipulation, which includes the use of intellectualism to maintain this position. So, consequential to this strategy is that they are not being included in this awakening. They are not being included in this explosion of access to wisdom, of integration into the humanity being. So they are being stagnated in their capacities through their reliance on the finite intellect. So, if we were to look at it as a scale, for a very long time, they have maintained this position here, where they are elevating their capacities because they have been more intellectual. They have hoarded information for themselves so they can maintain this position. And they have surrounded themselves by intellectuals to immunize themselves against scrutiny, against requiring to justify their position, what they do, any more than to say, we have access to the superior intellect, the superior information, superior education, therefore what we say is what shall be done. However, this rising in wisdom with the regular man, woman and child is occurring in this way. So there is this explosion of capacity to discern the truth, to understand what is most benevolent, what is most wise, what is most conducive to the expansion of the light, to the awakening of the light in the human experience. So in a relative sense, if we were to distill this concept down to something very simple, it is to say, the intellectuals and those that have used that system of authority are becoming more stupid, in a relative sense, to those that have embraced the polarization to the light, integration into the humanity being. They are becoming more brilliant. They are becoming more steeped in genius. While those that reject this integration are stagnant. And so while they remain as high intellects, surrounded by high intellects and highly educated, they are becoming, in a sense, and we use this word just within the context of the 3D human paradigm, but they are becoming increasingly inferior to those aspects of humanity which are embracing and are becoming part of this organic shift, transition into 5D, ascension into awakening as the humanity being, the higher vibratory state. And so, what will become increasingly experienced for those that have chosen to become integrated into this change, the increasing vibration, to ascend to the fifth dimensional state, the actions and words and mandates and so on of those that have been the traditional gatekeepers through intellectualism are beginning to become more transparent, are going to become perceived more as being infantile, as being lesser beings, as being stupid people who are trying to get the awakening individual to believe things which for the awakening individual is so apparently false, is so easily to see right through it. So it becomes like the experience of a child lying to an adult, trying to deceive an adult, and thinking that it is doing it so successfully, whereas the adult can see very clearly and very easily that it is a deliberate deception, and that what the child is trying to say and trying to get away with is based in something which is absolutely without merit, cannot be justified, does not stand up under scrutiny. This is becoming increasingly the experience. Until eventually, it's going to culminate with those who are awakening, looking at those who are becoming relatively more stupid because they are stagnated in the intellect, they're clinging to the darkness, rejecting of the light. That those who are awakening will come to a point where they will say, why are we listening to these people? Why are we following these people? Why do we acquiesce and subjugate ourselves to people which are clearly inferior to us in their capacity to see reality, to perceive what is so, to behave in a way which is most wise? And when enough believe in this way and see in the eyes and the expression of those around that this is a shared feeling, then those who have been in this position will be cast aside, will be completely rejected. And when they are rejected, and those that are awakening no longer acquiesce to the rules and mandates, then their power shall be over. And the awakened many will begin to manifest the wisdom of the human field from the grassroots, percolating through the organic mechanism, through the free market of ideas, such that the highest wisdoms, which are germinating from all of humanity, are recognized and then incorporated into the culture. This will be a dramatic shift. And those that were using this model of false intellectualism to engineer society from the top down for their benefit will be scrutinized to a degree once they have been disempowered, and during their process of disempowering, that they will be exposed for what they are. And they will, for the first time in generations, be subject to the consequences of their actions, of their crimes. And this paradigm will be forever over in the human experience. So, trust your inner feeling. Your inner feeling, when it is in conflict with the top-down agenda, with those who position themselves as the authority, forcing onto you ideas and concepts which you have a feeling is not right. Trust the feeling. Be prepared for when the time comes to reject those cultural mandates being engineered from the top and forced down. Be prepared to trust the self. And if you are going through this process of becoming more trustful of self, then be aware that those who have maintain their position of authority through intellectualism, have many means through which they integrate their agenda into society through the cultural pillars, through the news media, through entertainment media, and so on. So, begin to clear some of this from your life in the consumption of the societal culture. Clear out anything that you've been consuming which you consume so that you can be aware of the culture, so you can be cognizant of the zeitgeist. That is a channel coming from and created by those that have elevated themselves, such as the mainstream news media, such as much of entertainment media, such as much of education, law, government. Consume those only from the perspective, this is the recommendation, to become aware of what is the agenda of those that wish to diminish you as a means of reinforcing themselves, elevating themselves. Consume it only in that way. And replace those forms of consumption with forms of information, entertainment, education, so on, which are creations of those that are part of this awakening, that are part of this integration into the humanity being, that are part of this new human paradigm of service to others in preference to service to self, because they realize that all others are the same being. And so although it is perceived as service to others, it is in fact still service to self, because those that they serve are them. And so with the love they love themselves, they love you. And this is the transition from a top-down, forcing, engineering of culture into society to the organic intention, which is a percolation from the grassroots of culture into society, such that what manifests as implementation into the culture is the distillation of the highest wisdoms, which are at the capacity of the humanity being at that time. If you wish to be part of the shift, if you wish to experience the new earth-human paradigm, if you wish to prosper in a way which has never been possible under the tyranny, hiding behind the veil of intellectualism, then trust your inner voice and integrate into the humanity being through loving empathy for all other aspects of the humanity being, such that you can now access wisdom, which is the wisdom of the greater being, which you are, of the group being, which you will eventually awaken as. And this increase in your profundity through these deliberate shifts in what it means to be a human will create a vibratory quality which harmonizes others around you into this same way, into this new earth human paradigm. And so the ripple effect of your choices, of you deciding to be the different version of humanity, to lead the way, this ripple will have a tremendous impact, far beyond where you can see, affecting people that now are experiencing life harmonized in a different way because of they met someone who 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 met you. This is how impactful you are. Shift humanity into the new paradigm by doing your part, by being integrated into this experience. That is your intention for being here. This is a beautiful moment in the earth human experience. It is a coming of age. It is the completion of the gauntlet, and now being anointed with what is your rite of passage and is for all of humanity. We love you and we thank you for playing your part in the birthing of the new human experience.